Dear colleagues, it's an honor to be here today, and it's been really inspiring so far, and I hope we can go on in the same spirit. As you heard, my name is Ruth Illman, and I'm the director of a research institute called the Dyrness Institute for Research in Religious and Cultural History, connected to Åbo Akademi University in Turku, Finland, located 10 time zones away from here, 5,533 miles. One of my daughters looked that up, so it's a long way. My research background is in religious studies and Jewish studies, and most of my work has pertained to interreligious dialogue and cultural encounters, especially within the arts, which is also our topic here. So, let me start with a quote. I am convinced that interreligious dialogue in words and music will shape the future of humanity in an increasingly significant way. The encounter between religions can succeed only by being both curious and respectful at the same time. In these words, the Jewish Chazan, Daniel Kempin, presents Interreligious Chor Frankfurt, which he leads together with his Christian evangelical Lutheran colleague Bettina Strübel. IRCF is an ambitious amateur choir working under the leadership of these two visionary cantors to promote interreligious dialogue in music. The core of the choir's repertoire is the so-called Tehillim Psalmen project, which by now has resulted in 12 concerts, one in the spring and one in the autumn each year. For each concert, the cantors choose a biblical psalm around which the entire concert program is built. Approaching the text through compositions from various times and cultures, representing diverse voices from within different Jewish and Christian perspectives. Islam is engaged through compositions by Muslim musicians who create melodies for sacred Islamic texts and prayers that parallel the biblical psalm in focus. For this presentation, I have conducted ethnographic research with this choir in Frankfurt, participated in the concert, and also interviewed the key figures in IRCF. The title of this talk, Art as Dialogue, highlights a central claim that I want to advance. This claim is encapsulated in the small but significant preposition as. That is, the suggestion that art in general, and music in particular, is dialogue in itself and of its own right. To fulfill this potential, interreligious dialogue needs to be defined through a non-binary approach, a striving to formulate a conceptual framework within which intellectual content and artistic context, rational reasoning and emotional expressiveness, words and melodies, to put it simply, are not regarded as binary opposites in the context of interreligious dialogue. Building on the theoretical framework developed in these books, Art and Belief, Artists Engaged in Interreligious Dialogue, and Theology of the Arts, Engaging Faith, the latter co-authored with my American colleague, Professor Alan Smith, I argue that the arts should not be seen as mere illustrations of the theological claims and doctrinal definitions supporting dialogical undertakings, enriching but secondary aspects of dialogue, but as carriers and conveyors of meaning in themselves. Alan Smith and I have argued for a theology of the arts that begins with the practices of faithful communities in all the various forms they come, rather than abstract one-dimensional theories about religion. As a critical reflection on previous scholarship in the field, we want to highlight that the challenge of meeting the religious other is not just an intellectual question of rationally fitting knowledge from different traditions together. It is also an ethical challenge of being able to find confidence in one's own choice of perspective, to be open and respectful towards another perspective, relevant, legitimate, and sincere, even though it is not mine. Furthermore, it is a practical question of accepting the otherness of the other and living together in a plural world. The arts, we claim, can illuminate dialogue as non-binary by offering a tangible space where conversations and reflections across religions can take form, allowing space for individuality as well as socially and culturally embedded dimensions, embodiment and emotions, as well as rational reasoning. Above all, the arts invite creativity. They have the ability to awake the human capacity for imagination. The arts can provide significant starting points for transformative practices that enable a deepened understanding of otherness, as well as concrete interconnectedness with other human beings. By tapping into our imaginative resources, the arts can facilitate insights and experiences that stretch beyond the confinements of our immediate life worlds, restrained by our practical situation, which is necessarily limited in time, space, and resources. Here, the arts may open a window to the wider religious landscape outside our own context and let us grasp other, valuable and legitimate, yet different viewpoints to the world, stretching our imagination towards the previously unimagined. As mentioned before, the focus on art offers a complement to the established understanding of interreligious dialogue as an intellectual practice of acknowledging other dimensions of the religious consciousness, such as the visual, audible, and tactile. Art has the ability to touch us, not only as rational beings, but also as complex experiencing subjects with feelings, attitudes, memories, and hopes for the future. Thus, the arts reveal that interreligious dialogue is, and I quote, a major challenge to mind and heart, which is a formulation by Abraham Heschel. Focusing more specifically on the context of music, it is interesting to note that the use of music is often highlighted within contemporary theology of the arts as a particularly fruitful arena for interreligious engagement and dialogue between persons of different faiths. While creed and conduct may separate dialogue partners, music can offer an open and accessible context, which remains sensitive to differences and honors the integrity of each partaking individual. In dialogue settings, music seems particularly suited to engage people on several levels of being simultaneously, facilitating experiences that transform and expand their religious sensitivities. While music lacks the conceptual precision of verbal language, it can still be more refined and more powerful than mere words when it comes to giving voice to the inner and felt meaning of thoughts, to quote Frank Birch Brown. Religious studies scholar Rosalind Hackett calls for what she calls a more sonically aware religious studies. She emphasizes that aesthetic factors, practices, and the senses at large are gaining ground in contemporary research on religion, stepping out of the shadows of texts and doctrines, which have traditionally attracted most of the scholarly interest. Today, we see a greater acknowledgement of the vast and varying field of sound in religious contexts, engaging body and mind, tradition and innovation, aesthetic preferences, as well as cultural conventions. Now, to contextualize this theoretical argument, we'll now turn to the ethnographic case study I want to share with you today. Interreligious Accord Frankfurt was founded in 2012 by the Christian evangelical cantor Bettina Strübel and the Jewish Chassan Daniel Kempin. From the beginning, the choir was set up as an independent, religiously and politically unaffiliated association without formal ties to any governing body. IRCF is a non-professional mixed choir, but the level of ambition is high. The choir works on a project basis, but usually the number of singers is close to 50. Many of the singers are engaged in music, education, or religious organizations also in their professional lives. Pastors and educators, music school teachers, researchers, but also lawyers, medical doctors, students, and entrepreneurs are found in the ranks of IRCF. The lion's share of the singers come from an evangelical Christian background, but numerous other Christian denominations, as well as Orthodox and liberal Jews and Muslims from all over the world have found their way to the choir. The specific focus of this talk is the 10th Tehillim Salmen concert in Frankfurt on November 21st, 2017, dedicated to Psalm 46. The concert took place in an old convent in the old town of Frankfurt, where a film team also followed the concert as part of a documentary project for the German national TV. Psalm 46 had been chosen as the leitmotif of the concert due to its universal message of God as a safe haven and rescuer in times of need, but also because it inspired Martin Luther to write his most well-known psalm, Ein feste Burg, which is "A mighty fortress is our God." The year 2017, as you know, marked the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, which was widely acknowledged all over the Protestant world and contributed to the decision. An excerpt from the psalm, which I noted is also found on the wall of your prayer garden here at Fuller, reads as follows: God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. The Jewish and Christian musical compositions to this passage presented in the concert stretched from the 1600s until today. Thus, Psalm 46 was presented through compositions by, for example, the prominent 19th century composer of the Jewish Reform movement, Louis Lewandowski, as traditional Ashkenazi Torah recitation, Nusach, and in a newly composed piece by the Argentinian Jewish composer Daniel Galay, utilizing a Yiddish translation of the Hebrew Bible. From a Christian perspective, the psalm was performed, for example, as a Swedish folk melody in compositions by a number of European Catholic, Anglican, and Protestant composers originating from the 16th century all the way to the 20th century. During the concert, Psalm 46 was performed in no less than 7 languages: German, English, French, Swedish, Latin, Hebrew, and Yiddish. Over the years, IRCF has commissioned several newly written pieces for their projects. This has become somewhat of a trademark for the choir. Also, the current concert included 2 first performances, the Yiddish composition mentioned above, and a new composition by the Syrian-born German composer Samir Mansour. While Psalm 46 is part of the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Old Testament, it does not appear in any of the Islamic scriptural sources. Therefore, Mansour based his work on parallel texts pertaining to the same theme from Islamic holy scriptures, a prayer from the Sunnah and 2 Quranic surahs, elaborating on the theme of refuge and comforting God in parallel with Psalm 46. And an excerpt from this reads, "Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of daybreak, from the evil of that which he created. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the sovereign of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the retreating whisperer, who whispers evil into the breasts of mankind, from among the jinn and mankind." Although settling for a traditional Arabic key, Mansour faced many challenges in creating a melody to these texts. Even though Quranic texts are often recited in melodically beautiful and elaborate ways, composed religious music and singing are not part of the Islamic tradition, neither in the form of cantorial nor communal singing. Therefore, this composition was a rare undertaking, even contested in some circles. And this progressive stance of the choir was powerfully underlined by the fact that a young woman, Dilruba Khan, recited the texts during the concert. The 3 traditions were not merely presented side by side in the concert, but also entered into dialogue and intermingled at times in innovative, often somewhat humoristic ways. On a playful note, we'll notice how the newly written Quranic surah turned into wordless Hasidic nigun in a place. So it was moving from the Islamic to the Jewish and then back via a 17th century English choral when in the concert. And as I said, the German national TV was there to follow the concert. So we'll now listen to a 5-minute excerpt from the concert, so you'll see what I'm talking about. Please. So now you know what we're talking about. Each concert of the Helene Salmen project is also accompanied by a panel discussion where theologians from the three traditions meet to discuss the themes raised by the psalm in question, similarities as well as differences. These academic conversations serve to illustrate how a non-binary approach to dialogue can be realized in practical art-oriented setting, bridging the gap between intellectual and emotional or experiential dimensions of the interreligious encounter. This time, the trialogue was arranged the day following the concert. 3 German scholars formed the panel, and they discussed various topics related to Psalm 46, such as the images of God described in the psalm and their roots in connection to and significant for the respective traditions. While this discussion was attracted significantly less people than the concert, a majority of the choir members were present, however, and active in the discussion. This clearly showed how deeply the close engagement with the psalm text had influenced the singers. The panel discussion was not the only occasion when theological and ethical reflection was given to the musical work of the choir, however. During the concert itself, various members of the choir gave short introductions and responses to the pieces to be sung and the theological ideas underlining the build-up of the repertoire. The reflections of the singers brought substantial depth to the concert. Together with a detailed program booklet, they provided a rich insight into the intellectual aspects of the creative choir work. Now, many interesting aspects of the relationship between art and introduced dialogue emerge from the interview narratives collected for this analysis. In many respects, IRCF is an extraordinary choir that requires a value-based commitment and conviction, stretching far beyond the regular choir experience. The rehearsal periods become spaces for open and deep-reaching dialogues in themselves. The choir does not only focus on the melodies to be presented at the concert, but also engage in study circles where the texts are read, discussed, and sometimes enacted through bibliodrama. Hence, this dialogical approach illustrates the non-binary approach suggested in this talk, combining intellectual reflection with emotional and embodied experiences into a comprehensive understanding. Sometimes Ghazan Kempin concedes they are criticized for being unserious because they are not theologians. In his view, however, the musical engagement with other traditions is far more multidimensional and deep-reaching than scholarly scrutiny. And I quote, "Sometimes singing together will give you a much deeper knowledge. If you also sing, it's not just intellectual. You're doing it yourself. You taste the other tradition. You take it into your mouth. It is both physical and emotional, and it gets very personal." Dialogue is needed on several levels in society, Kempin believes. Music constitutes only one of them. In music, differences can be approached and discussed without leading to conflict, Cantor Strubel stresses. In music, difference symbolizes richness rather than conflict. In music, you can actually take delight in difference, she says. The tangible commitment to interreligious dialogue described by the choir leaders seems to be a core value and motivation also among the singers, besides the artistic aspects of the work. As the choir member Frances notes, "I sing in the IRCF because it is important to me to promote interreligious dialogue and to give it more concrete space, both in my personal and in my social life. For me, the IRCF shows what an important opportunity for diversity, collective artistic work can be." As noted before, the singers of IRCF come from different traditions and bring different experiences and beliefs with them to the mutual musical work. Under the guidance of the 2 cantors, they develop a concert program which bears traces of this working process. it is not a monolithic and fixed concert repertoire, but rather a forward-moving musical dialogue where the different religious, temporal, and musical elements are related and speak meaningfully to one another, while still not merging into a single blend. In this process, choir improvisation and different musical collage techniques play a prominent role. Sharing, but not mixing, is thus a guiding principle for the choir as they go about creating musical medleys for their concerts. According to the cantors, the vision is to bring together quite concretely melodies from different times and cultures in a unified performance to show the similarities and common concerns that unite people over the divides of time and place. Still, it is important to maintain the distinguishing features of each melody. Thus, the collage technique results in a musical form that resembles a bead of pearls rather than an interreligious potpourri or intercultural concoction. In this way, common ground is created while neither the musical nor the religious integrity of the different musical pieces, or the singers, for that matter, is unsettled. This collage technique seems appreciated by the singers as well. I especially like the sound collage. It is very creative, Annegret says. Cantor Strubel points out that the work of the choir is serious but not a service. The concert may have a liturgical form at times, and the melodies carry religious significance, but the concert events are not to be taken as joint interreligious services. That is why it is possible to bring melodies together in the collage fashion. It offers a form that allows for proximity while not fusing the traditions. How can we weave together our lives without losing ourselves? She asks, to make her point clear. It is obvious that the aspect of peace building through creative interreligious work is quintessential for many of the singers in the choir. The cantors constantly negotiate how they should relate to the wider world in their musical work. Should the concerts be a safe haven, free from political discussions and social engagement? Or is it necessary to take a stand against atrocities and injustices also as artists? This balancing act has proven difficult at times. On the one hand, the choir wants to be politically uncommitted, but on the other hand, they cannot turn their backs to the evils of the world, the oppression and violence carried out in the names of various religions around them. At this point, Kempin is definitely more radical. Our visions are worth nothing if we cannot address the difficult questions as part of a musical work, he states. The musical dialogue is worthless if it becomes too naive, too rosy. His dream is that one year the choir could choose to work with a psalm dealing with the Temple of Jerusalem, addressing the conflict in the Middle East from both Jewish, Christian, and Muslim perspectives. So far, the time has not been ripe. Strubel is more careful and holds that even if the choir cannot solve the most difficult issues in current interreligious relations, they can at least try to create a space where the other can be recognized in her full humanity. Perhaps we can resonate together in the music that we create, she says. The two choir leaders often return to the set of interdependent values they wish to promote in the work. Respect, understanding, and peace, but also equality between cultures, generations, and genders. Strubel says, "We are all human beings, connected by a human desire to find meaning in life, to see that there is a deeper meaning with our existence. We're united by a shared hope." The cantors also stress the role of music as a bridge between religious and secular worldviews today. Many secular people today have no contact with people who are actively religious and no apprehension of what it might mean for a person to hold a religious faith. In this situation, music can offer an approachable gateway into dialogue. Taking part in a concert where religious music is performed might feel like an easier way to approach the religious other than taking part in a religious service. And due to its multivocal engagement of mind, emotions, and body, the music may help a secular person to see glimpses of the world as it appears for a believer. This potential of music remains largely untapped in today's world, Strübel concludes. So in sum, I have tried to show that the arts in general and music in particular are more than mere tools for dialogue. In light of the work of the IRCF, it is clear that this is too simple a perception of the multifaceted role of art in interreligious encounters. The arts are not just illustrations of the more substantial theological points, points underpinning dialogue. Instead, the arts can be approached as constitutive dimensions of the interreligious encounter in themselves. The tangible and embodied character of music as a form of dialogue engages several senses, tasting the words of another tradition as you sing, touching otherness as you create music with your hands, or hearing the other as you are enveloped by the sacred sounds of a tradition other than your own. This is non-binary dialogue in practice. Finally, one may wonder, is it really possible to change the world with choir music? What can an interreligious choir accomplish in a world of very concrete unfairness, where religious differences seems to lead to hatred and abuse rather than to inspire respect and curiosity? Is the IRCF vision a mere utopia, a rosy dream in a harsh world driven by the urge to dominate and profit by political agendas and exploitation? No, Daniel Kempin answers emphatically, and I quote, "Our work builds community on a very practical level. The members of the choir are transformed by the experience of participating in the concerts. They will bear traces of this experience in their souls forever, and this will affect their actions and attitudes in all spheres of their lives. But awareness of music as a way to create increased interreligious understanding also spreads like rings on the water because of our work. I think we really can contribute to changing the world." Recalling my own experience of taking part in the concert in Frankfurt, which you saw an excerpt from just a minute ago, I am prone to side with Hassan Kempin on this point. It is not an exaggeration to say that the audience was ravished. Encores were delivered after standing ovations, and the music seemed to speak very powerfully to the listeners. To me, it seemed as if a sonically aware space for interreligious dialogue materialized before our eyes and ears. As Roberta King and Sui Ling Tan note in relation to their project Uncommon Sounds, and I quote, "Intimate expressive links between music, art, and world religions provide rich resources for understanding the belief systems of people and their influence on society and daily living." Therefore, my key conclusion is, not only should interreligious theology be concerned with dialogue in or through music and other art forms, but also acknowledge art as dialogue. Thank you.
Mi yeti shenido